This is an overview of my rationale for staging and animating my layers. Throughout the process, I'm thinking of visual motifs. Any visual I can create, images, movements, effects, to symbolically represent the concept of the movie Blue Velvet. The idea of descending from the sky down into the depths, a pan down from heaven to hell, was developed at the sketching stage. So I'm keeping all my materials, the keywords, mood board, sketches, handy so that I can refer to them to stimulate ideas should I encounter any creative blocks. The next step I will take is staging the Photoshop layers in 3D space in After Effects. This will give the layers a dimensional feel as we move through the scenes, creating a believable foreground, middle ground, and background. This is not a 3D modeled scene, so we can't move 360 degrees through this scene, but with some creativity and a few tricks, we can make this feel more like a real 3D space. I enabled 3D on the layers that I want to stage. This allows the layer to be staged in space, no matter the layer order. To properly stage these layers, I want to see a view from the side. I enabled two views, with one of the views being a left view, so that I can see what depth the layers are at. The other view is the active camera. That will be the view that is exported. I move the sky back on the Z-axis to 800. That will be my background. Moving the layer back changes its relative size, and I can move that layer over because I retained the layer size when I imported, giving me lots of options on its position. I used the fence to create a middle ground, moving it back, but not as far back as the sky, to 500. Now the edges are exposed a bit, but I can increase the scale a bit to compensate. As long as I don't scale up too much, I should be fine. 110% is okay. Then I'll adjust the position so that it looks centered. The flowers are my foreground. I left them at 0 in Z-space. So now I have a foreground of the flowers at 0, a middle ground of the fence at 500, and a background of the sky at 800 pixels in Z-space. Now for the second scene. The dirt will also be at 0 in the foreground, as it is on the same plane as the flowers. I already staged this dirt layer just below the frame in Photoshop, so I won't have to move it for now. Next, I move the cave back a bit in Z-space to 250 pixels. I need to scale it up a bit more to cover the frame. The cave will need to be below everything. If I'm going to pan down from the sky, I'm going to want significant space between the dirt and the cave. So I move the vertical y-axis numbers way down, below the frame. If you wanted to do a horizontal camera move, then you move your second scene out of the frame horizontally. Now that my stage is set, I can apply a camera. Cameras are just layers, so go to Layer, New, Camera. The default settings are fine. For more information on this screen, see the link in the video description. The camera is now what we are looking at the scene through. Whatever the camera is pointed at will be what the viewer of the exported video will see. Now, if you think about an actual film set, most often the camera is mounted on something called a dolly. A camera dolly is a wheeled cart used to create smooth horizontal camera movements. In this instance, I used it to create a smooth movement down. So we're going to create a dolly layer. This will be a null object layer that will control all the camera movements. To make a null object layer, go to Layer, New, Null Object. I renamed it Dolly. Since I want the dolly to have 3D controls, I made it a 3D layer. To control the camera with the dolly, it needs to be parented to it. I'll grab the camera layer, pick whip, and drag it to the dolly layer. Now the camera is parented to the dolly. Whatever I want to do with the dolly, the camera will do the same, taking all the 3D layers, the sky, the fence, the flowers, the dirt, the cave, with it. I created a keyframe for the start position on the dolly layer position property line. I moved the cursor forward to about the 50-second mark and created another keyframe by moving the Y vertical position of the dolly down to the cave. Obviously, I will need to make some adjustments to the layer positions, but my goal here is to sketch my basic movement. First adjustment, I want a bit more empty space between the dirt and the cave. It should take some time to get to the abyss. So I move the position of the cave layer down a bit on the vertical y-axis. Then I move the dolly down. Second adjustment. I want the scene to start much higher, in the clouds, close to the heavens. It will make the descent more dramatic. Scrub through and make sure that both the start and the end points are in the right position. To preview a RAM-intensive thing like a camera move, I would recommend reducing the playback quality. If I preview at full quality, it might not preview in real time. Here are the important points. I want to make sure the start and end point are correct. And I want to make sure that the speed of the motion is right before moving on and getting to the details. Here's a tip on the camera move. Add an easy out keyframe at the beginning and an easy in keyframe at the end. This adds an exaggerated slow in, slow out. To make a better transition, I masked out some areas. One thing I need to do is mask out the sky underground with the rectangle tool. I drew over the area I wanted to mask out. A mask by default will show the area. I clicked on the invert mask to mask it out. Now the dirt. If I zoomed in, you can see it's pretty sharp between the two layers, and I want to add a feather mask to create a more natural line between the flowers and the ground. I drew around the area I wanted to remain visible. To feather the mask, untwirl the mask menu and increase the mask feather to get a soft edge. Then I move the dirt up a bit more into the right position. The last detail I added is some movement in the sky at the start. To do that, I applied an effect called corner pin. This is a nice effect for simulating movement in clouds. I searched in the effects menu and dragged it onto the sky layer. Created 2 keyframes in the top corners in the layer effects menu. Now that I've sketched out my movement and adjusted the layers by masking and creating some cloud movement, I am ready to move on. Next, I added a video clip, a time lapse of a dying rose. I changed the layer order so that the rose is on top of the cave. I left it as 2D for now and scaled it down so that it fits between the rocks in the cave. I only want to see the rose portion of the video, so I used a mask to isolate it. This eliminates most of the background. What remains of the background is neutral and dark, so it should be easy to correct. My next step was to make this red rose blue so that it fits in with the underworld. For that, I used levels in the effects menu. Levels allow you to edit RGB channels, and it's not subtle like curves. It's a very aggressive way to change color, which I need to change red to blue. In the Layer Effects window, I have a menu that allows me to edit RGB or each color channel separately. I lowered the red, raised the blue. I can edit on the graph or edit numerically. I can layer effects on the video. I want to increase the contrast a bit so that the background of the rose is completely dark. In the effects search bar, I typed bright to bring up the brightness and contrast effect and dragged it into the layer effects window. Then I adjusted the brightness and contrast until the background dropped out. Now I have a dying rose behind the cave. I can return to these effects at any time by selecting the layer and clicking on the effects menu tab for the layer. That is enough color correction for now. I can always make fine-tuning adjustments later. At any point, you can add a layer to your Photoshop file and then import it as a single layer into your After Effects project. I have added this microphone, symbolizing one of the characters, the singer, Dorothy Valens. Likewise, the mask represents the villain of the movie, Frank Booth. I will animate them when I get into my finishing touches. Next, I'm going to build my main movie title, which will appear at the end of the title sequence. I typed out my title, Blue Velvet, and centered it into the frame. Next, I imported some textures that I want to try out from a site called MitchMartinez.com. He is a cinematographer who has created lots of texture footage that is free to use. A link to this site is in the video description. The fabric is nice. To create a mat with this fabric texture, I used the layer track matte menus. On the fabric layer, I selected the text layer for the title. Now the fabric only shows through on the text. The texture adds a nice movement to the text without any keyframes. Then I pre-comped the layers so that I could add some color effects. I used the curves effect to make the fabric a little more blue. Now is a good time to add music. The music will determine what final adjustments I will make to the camera movement and the timing of the animations. I have 2 tracks I'm going to use that are from the movie. One that represents the heights of platonic love to be used in the sky and above ground, and the other, a more ominous track that represents the dark curiosity of the lead character, to be used as we descend into the depths. I placed the first platonic track. Then I moved the second music track into the timeline. I want some overlap just at the point where we pass the dirt. I created fades in the audio tracks so that one faded into the other gradually. The worst thing is having audio cut out at the end. So at the end of my composition, I created another fade. Now that I have my audio placed, I can work on making adjustments to the camera move and the animations to match the music precisely.